All right, we're here at my urban worm bag, and here is the temperature inside the urban worm bag, and here's the temperature outside the urban worm bag in 99% humidity. So let's open it up inside and see if any worms are on the surface at that temperature. And sure enough, look at that. We've got all kinds of worm butts right on the surface, so clearly they don't mind that temperature. Now, as you can see, we are making some major changes in this worm bin because we've got back to the water bottles that I used to try and cool down the bin. And let me get them out of here, and you can see lots of worms right underneath because they like the coolness that it brings and also the water that kind of forms around it from the humidity inside here. So we'll pull out this last one, see if there's any worms on it, and sure enough there are. And then finally, here is our temperature sensor. So if you remember last time, we waited 30 days to see what the worm bin was able to accomplish with all the food that we had given it, but this time it has only been 15 days. So we're going to kind of compare and see how the worms do on a 30-day interval versus a 15-day interval. So as I kind of talked about before, I've had to make some major changes in here because the temperature has gone from being in the 80s throughout most of the day to now it's in the low to mid 90s, and that has really warmed up our urban worm bag based on where it is in our lanai on the back porch. And some of my earlier videos from last summer, you kind of saw where it is placed, and unfortunately that's the only place I have for it. I really wish it could be an inside worm bin, but the executive producer has some other ideas. I'm just gonna get some of the big stuff out of the way and let's dig in, because right here we put in all kinds of great food stuff, but first we put down some shredded cardboard, and I want to see how wet that is, because following that we gave them some carrot tops, some lettuce, some kale, some banana peels and apple cores, along with some cucumber ends and yellow squash. Then we put in the big dog dish looking cardboard material that we had gotten from the strawberry festival, along with some bananas, some more lettuce and cucumbers, some strawberry tops, and then a big slice of watermelon. And finally the amendments of warm chow coffee grounds and eggshell grit that I always get. And then of course we add more shredded cardboard and more of our soiled paper towels and napkins. And I'm feeling right in here kind of that dog dish cardboard and what is left of that watermelon. It's just kind of a mushy mesh in there, and the worms certainly found their way up in there and they kind of obliterated that watermelon. But there is still more kind of food stuff in here than we experienced after 30 days, and we certainly expect that. Now the other thing that I've been doing in here is I have been watering it in the form of, spraying some mist on it, and that's because way down below in our last harvest it kind of felt a little crunchy, and I'm feeling that too, just in kind of that bottom part right there. And I want to get that damp without, liquid pouring out, so I'm kind of walking a fine line there. And this again is some kale that takes, it appears, a little bit longer than lettuce. So let's keep digging down because I'm feeling some dry stuff here, so it looks like maybe the spraying is not quite enough, or maybe that's because the dog dish cardboard was right there. So I just want to kind of dig down till we get to where the castings were, because we kind of had a pretty good castings layer last time. I don't necessarily want to dig too far into that because I'm going to layer this thing up and try and get it to the worms to kind of focus on what's up here. And let me just kind of dig around, and I will gather some of this cardboard and put it in the middle so we can start our next feeding. Things are looking great. It definitely has more food stuff kind of in here and not all the way eaten. I can actually smell a little bit of it too, so it's probably matted down. So big food, big feeding like that might have been just a little bit too much for them. And something I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spread things out a little bit, but I'm only gonna do it on one side so that the worms have kind of a place to flee if they need to for the heat, just in case I can't get some water bottles in. No matter what, the worms can go down to get a little bit more cool if I don't use those water bottles. So it's not an absolute must, but I do like to use it to kind of cool this top layer so they'll get to the food. And you saw it, 91 degrees Fahrenheit. They did not have an issue, and we're right up there on the top, which I find to be pretty amazing. All right, so this is the side we're gonna feed. So just gonna kind of leave this like this, and we will put bedding all over it. So for the last 6 months, I've been putting in dry shredded cardboard, but this time I've wet it down, and I'm just gonna dump that in there, and we'll just kind of spread it all around just like that, and it's nice and damp. But we're also going to add in some of our paper towel rolls and napkins. So let me just kind of rip those up and spread those around. I don't really like to use napkins all that much, but I kind of want to get rid of them in my worm bins, and I'll open them up a little bit so they don't get too matted down. There we go, just like that. So now we're going to go in with our feeding, and again, I'm just going to dump it on this side. I had a commenter mention that maybe I'll feed it on one side and that would kind of give the worms a place to run, so I'm going to try that out. As you can see, this is a lot of very liquidy kind of food with these lettuces and broccoli stalks. We've got a little bit more of that too, but we've also got some berries, and we've got a banana right here that I'll just kind of open up. And this looks like it's going to be a good feeding, but even though we're on one side, I want to kind of spread it out so I'm not creating a regular compost pile in here that's going to heat up. So I'm going to put that right there. And then we'll go in with an eggplant and some more strawberries, banana peels, and apple core. And I will just kind of give them an entrance to this eggplant because the peel is pretty tough. And if anybody's grown eggplant, especially here in Florida, you get a lot of fruit from it. So we just could not get to it. And look at that, I'm trying to give it a twist and just kind of penetrate it, and I can't. Let me get a knife. All right, and we'll just kind of do an X marks the spot, try and make sure I cut away from myself. And there we go. And if you heard a caw in there, that was my neighbor Jeff that we've seen on a couple of videos. He's over there laughing. So now we're going to add some of the applesauce that I use in one of my other bins, and this will surely add some moisture. So hopefully I don't get any of that liquid down below, but I'll be monitoring for sure. So that is a really big fun feeding, and I think 15 days is kind of the interval that I need to go at because a lot of the food was gone, but we still had some more, so I can kind of see when it is that I need to be feeding. If I had waited a little bit longer, there would be no food, and it would kind of be suspect about, you know, what the interval is and how much to feed. But I think right here is kind of going to be our standard feeding for the summertime. All right, so let's put in some amendments, and this is just some worm chow, which I make out of expired grains in our pantry, and I think this round is probably the end of the oatmeal that we have been using. And then we'll go in with some coffee grounds. I'm going to use a lot of them because we are making lots of coffee grounds, and I would just want to make sure I get rid of them here in my worm bins. Used coffee grounds have great surface area, so the worms seem to get to them and eat them pretty well, and all the nitrogen in there is going to be great for your garden. This right here is just eggshell grit that the worms use in their gizzards to grind up their food. All right, to cover up this massive feeding, we're going to add more shredded cardboard, and we're going to add it to both sides, but mostly over the food right there. And we'll just kind of spread that out just like that. And then we'll top it off with more of our kind of paper waste. And again, we've got some more of our toilet paper rolls, our paper towels, paper towel rolls, and I'm just going to kind of spread this out all around here. So with all those changes that are happening in the summer, I am going to change the way that I do things in here, and I'm going to start spraying down. A lot of you in the comments had mentioned, hey, things may be getting a little dry in there, and sure enough, I totally agree. That little temperature change from being in the 80s to 90s, I guess some would say it's a huge temperature change, really affected the bin and really kind of let the moisture within the bin evaporate a lot more. So I'm going to be fighting this by spraying it down, and I'm going to be adding those frozen water bottles, which again help the moisture within the bin to condense down and go into the bin. Now I don't mind the top being a little dry because I am going to be doing this probably on a daily basis with the frozen water bottles all over the bin. But if your urban worm bag is inside, you really do not need to deal with something like this. And if you have it in an area where it's shaded outside, you probably also don't have to deal with too much of this other than kind of the changes in humidity, that kind of thing. But just the odd place that I have this, again, it's the only place that I can have it outside. And when the executive producer got this for me, she said it had to be outside. I'm just gonna deal with what I'm given. So let's go ahead and put our temperature sensor back in. I think I'll put it over the food right there. If you want to see a video of how I kind of dealt with the temperatures last summer, check out this one right here. So with that, I hope you're having a great day. I hope your worm bins are doing fantastic. So happy vermicomposting, everybody. Take care now.